Thanks so much to all my patrons. Join now to help support the channel and help pick the books I review on this channel. Link in the description. And I am done. Okay, so I just got done reading The Ember Blade. This is book 1 of the Darkwater Legacy by Chris Wooding, and I want to give you my unedited review upon finishing the book, which is literally just right now. So, yep, not a fan. I don't give a lot of 2 stars, but I'm giving another one, and that's 2 in a row for me now. And that's unfortunate. I didn't like this thing. It's a little perplexing and in some ways expected too, because once again, it feels like the entire world loves this thing. And I'm just kind of here on my little island of sadness. And it feels like I'm just trying to be contrary, but I swear I'm not. I go into these books without any expectations, right? And after I'm done, I sometimes go read reviews of them, and sometimes I read this book and I'm like, that was incredible, and I go read reviews and it's very mixed. And other times like this, I read a book and I'm like, man, clearly nobody liked this thing, and I go read it and it's just literally like all 5-star reviews from everybody I know, and all of the top reviews are all 5 stars, like way above what it normally would be for a normal book. So, yep, we're in that boat again. So, yeah. But I also kind of feel like when I finish this one, it makes sense why I felt like on an island here, because this book did a lot of things that work for a lot of people, but they just don't work for me. And I don't think it's anything about the author, just like the last one that I read, The Priest of Bones. Probably an awesome book. Not a Matt book, though, because this is a classic fantasy book. But it's written in 2018. This has been done many times, where an author will heavily borrow from the things that made classic fantasy so great. And I don't say heavily borrow in a negative connotation. I think borrowing is necessary in order to write a book. You can't just literally reinvent the wheel. Every now and then you get a really special author that just does something completely unique, kind of like Steven Erikson with Malazan. But it's not expected. And of course you're going to borrow stuff. That's the point of things in life, is you borrow and you create better. But in my opinion, unlike other modern fantasy takes on classic fantasy books, this one forgot to change anything. And it's frustrating because, we have this these 2 unassuming characters that grew up in a small little town that gets swept up in this grand events that are focused on this coming of age kind of fantasy tale. Stop me if I'm reminding you of anything else. We've got this wizard character who literally hits their staff to the ground and talks about blocking the way from somebody else from coming through. We've got scenes that feel right out of the Wheel of Time, getting lost in like a dark maze. We've got these dark knights that are chasing the main characters for long periods of time that are completely mysterious. And again, while I'm not saying this is a ripoff akin to R.R. Verdi's The First Binding, because nothing will ever be that much of a ripoff in the history of all time, it just didn't do enough to keep my interest. That's my problem here. And part of the problem with not bringing anything fresh to the old school style is that the plot points can be seen a mile away. The more you read in fantasy, the more they become really relevant. And I find that these kind of books work exceedingly well for those that are not super, super, super into fantasy. Now, again, this might be a book that people that are super into fantasy love. But I think that if you haven't read a ton of fantasy, there are things here that you would enjoy that people like me and maybe some other people that have read hundreds and hundreds of fantasy books might not be able to. Because there are these tropes that come up. And in a book like this, you can see where the story is going. I don't like that. I like to be a little shocked. I like to be surprised. I like to not know where things are going. And that's not what happened here. Some old school vibes on newer books keep things fresh, like The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill, where it felt like it was a ripoff of more so The Wheel of Time than Lord of the Rings, but it felt kind of like a Wheel of Time ripoff. And then it became its own thing. And then it took that and just ran with it in the future books. Maybe this one does the same. Maybe this one goes in a totally different direction in the second book and beyond. I won't know. I'm not going to read it. But that's certainly possible, and I will allow it that's in the realm of possibility. With something like The Bound of the Broken, I liked it more up to that point, so even though I didn't love the first book, I heard everybody telling me, it changes, don't worry, and that helped me get out of that mode that I might have gotten into. This one certainly did, but it's not as good as The Bound of the Broken, in my opinion, in general. It's just, nothing felt innovative here. There's a very long portion of the book that involves our main characters going to like a prison. But it comes when the story starts to get interesting, and it just sucks the soul out of all the fun that we're having. We've got these prisoner scenes in other books in the beginning of fantasy novels that can work really, really well, but usually in short bursts. Kind of think like the Way of Kings, where you have Kaladin in the beginning of the story. It's not a prison, but he's a prisoner. But it's not a very long portion of the story. We get a few chapters from that, and then we move on. And, it can also work well on the other side, right? Where you have like a series, or even later on in the first book, after we're already emotionally invested in the characters, you can get these prison scenes, and it pulls you in more. It draws on the heartstrings more. But the author wants me to feel the pain of these characters and what they're going through when I don't care about them yet. Eventually I may. But that early on in the story, just because you're the protagonist does not mean that I'm emotionally invested in you. That takes time. And it felt like there were these assumptions, or maybe I'm just a cold-hearted person, but I didn't care about these characters yet. So it's like, okay, it's sad, but it doesn't hit the same. And it should have either gone quicker or waited till longer in the book, for me. And the other problem is that it slows the story down to a crawl for an excessive amount of time. I also don't really understand the author's point of having two main characters. And maybe I'm totally off base here. I'm not like a fantasy book critic. I am a guy with a camera that pressed play one day. So let's be clear here. I might not know what I'm talking about, but just giving you my opinions off the cuff. But multiple characters can be awesome. In fact, I like multi-POV stories more than I like single POV characters in general. But usually when you have multi-POV, or let's just pick, two POVs here, both of the characters are doing active things at the same time. And it makes sense to show both their perspectives, because you couldn't have told that story with one. You've got stories going on in A and B. But here, it felt like you've got the story going on in A, and B is doing nothing. And then B is doing something, and A is doing nothing. And they just switch off back and forth. And it doesn't make sense to me. Like, why not just have one point of view character? Why not have multiple POVs, but keep their plots really distinct? I don't really understand that quite at all. I haven't read a lot of books that utilize this. I think there's a reason for it. I don't think it's a good writing technique. And just kind of lost me a little bit and made me question the plotting. It also, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound bad. I don't mean it as bad as it's going to come off, but it feels like the book could have been half the length and seriously improved upon it. Now, I am a guy that likes big, chunky books. When I find a book that I love, there's no end to how long I wish that book were. And I know that there's this, and I think I'm very different than most people. I think most people will say, like, have this arbitrary cutoff of, like, I was watching a review today. I forgot who it was, but was doing a review of one of the Malazan books. I think it was StoryTube. And he said, I generally don't like books over 1,000 pages, just this arbitrary number. But for me, if I like the book, why not make it 5,000? Why not 10,000? I want to keep reading about these characters and this story. But sometimes it feels like padding, and I felt like that here, unfortunately. It feels like this should have been a 500-page book, or less. And it felt like a weird kind of like YA epic fantasy hybrid, where the author added all of this padding to the whole book to make it more epic. But that didn't hide the fact that at its core, this feels like a YA story. Now, I'm not meaning that in a slanderous way. YA is immensely popular for a reason. It's not particularly what I'm interested in, but I suspect YA probably sells more than adult fantasy. So, and there's a reason for it. It can be really, really, really good. In fact, I like some YA. And I'm reading more and more YA that I mean, most lit RPG is inherently kind of a YA story, and I'm really liking lit RPG in general. But yeah, it just felt like that's what this was. It had this veneer of epicness to it that took away from the story, not added to it. And yeah, just felt very cookie cutter. You know, it felt like the plot had a lot of inconsistencies to it. It felt like these characters had this massive jump in skill that didn't feel earned. It felt like the story got really jagged, where about halfway through the story, we all of a sudden have this quest that we need to go on that didn't feel important up to that point. Felt just kind of thrown in. Felt like the characters, it turned into a weird heist book when the characters all of a sudden became like master heist people when they're not that. That's not what they were trained to do. It also felt like one of the characters becomes like an epic swordsman because he wanted it to be so. And maybe there's like in-universe reasons for this that I'll find out later from a magical perspective, but I don't think that's the case. Yeah, so if you're interested in this book, maybe don't watch my review. Maybe go watch one of the other, 50 reviews out there that are praising this book, or maybe get a balance of them, because I don't know what people are thinking. I haven't watched them. After I finish recording this, I'm going to go watch one. Maybe Patrick did it or something. He usually loves books on YouTube. Usually when he posts a video, it's because he liked it. If he didn't like it, he just puts a Goodreads review. So maybe I'll go watch Patrick's review, because I'm sure he liked this. It seems right up his alley. Not me. And I wish it was, because, this ended up being a pretty frustrating experience for me. It sounds like a 1-star in terms of all the things I didn't like about it, but it did hold my interest enough to finish the book. I usually save 1-stars for books that I didn't even finish, and I was compelled to finish it. I wanted to see the twist happen, even though it was pretty obvious that it was coming. But I still wanted to, it's a long book. I felt like once I got over a certain amount, I kind of felt committed to it, but I didn't end up hate reading it at any point. I just lacked interest in it, and that's a 2-star rating all day, every day for me. So that is it for me. I'm going to keep this a little bit shorter than normal, but thank you so much, and as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all of my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Gil, Gregory, JD, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝗟𝗏𝗀, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tay C, Tahir, Tommy, Zion, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Joe UK, Kat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Philippe, Sky, and Wacky. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.